Welcome everybody to the Women of Flexo Lunch and Learn program. I'm very excited today to introduce Lori Sutton and Cory Kuhlenschmidt from Berry Global here shortly. I think you'll really enjoy their presentation today. Next slide, Katie. I'm Jenny Skyle with Berry Global, one of the co-chairs of the Women of Flexo Committee, and along with Nona Wilbright, professor at Clemson University, we're very excited to present today's Lunch and Learn. I like to start these meetings off with a positive quote, and I thought this was fitting for today's presentation. Be somebody who makes everybody feel like somebody. I can tell you that I didn't come up with this positive statement, but will creatively take credit for it since it goes great with today's presentations. Before we move to the agenda, I would also like to introduce Mark Cisternino, who is the president of the FTA. He would like to say a few words. Mark?
Jenny, thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for participating in this webinar here today. Say good afternoon or good morning, wherever you may be. We've had a great start to the Women of Flexo initiative. And what I really like about it is that the leadership is thinking outside of the box. I know that's a often used coin term, but there are a tremendous number of issues that are going on in the business world today that FTA really doesn't cover as part of its charge. But I think that having a group like the Women of Flexo take on these initiatives and work to educate our membership, I think it adds great value to the whole FTA experience. Wanted to also add my thanks to Cory and Lori for participating in this presentation. We look forward to hearing what you have to say. And I just thank the Women of Flexo leadership, as well as Katie Graham, our lead on the FTA staff, for really doing a great job getting this off the ground and really serving the needs of Women of Flexo. So thank you all, and have a great webinar.
All right, thank you, Mark. Katie, flip to the next slide for the agenda. Give a quick review about the agenda. Back one, sorry. There we go. Okay. The agenda for today, we're going to go through, talk about what the Women of Flexo is all about. Just a brief clip about that. We'll then go through the leadership team committee updates so you can see what's going on in the groups. I'll introduce the speakers for today's presentation, and then they will present their topics as well. Our hope is to have about 15 minutes at the end of the presentations for a Q&A session. During this Lunch and Learn, you can put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and if you prefer to be anonymous, there should be a box there to check as well too. If we don't get to all the questions before the hour is over, we will be working on our meeting recap and have it sent out to everyone on the call, and it will include all the Q&As we did cover and anything we didn't have time to cover today. Next slide. Okay, what is the Women of Flexo? Our mission and our vision include that the Women of Flexo is comprised of industry members who work to support and promote women in the flexographic industry through a variety of opportunities. And to learn more about it, please go to womenoflexo.org, and you'll see all kinds of cool stuff that we're working on and we're going to talk about today as well. Okay, the Women of Flexo is also broken up into 4 different areas or committees. The Leadership Diversity Group is working towards increasing female representation on different panels, speaking opportunities, and industry leadership roles. The Recruitment Committee is coordinating with schools to find members in network. Marketing and Strategy is increasing awareness of the group and defining its long and short-term goals. And the Mentorship Group is developing relationships between members new to the industry and those with experience. So the next slide is a panel of the group of ladies that are on our leadership diversity team. Laura, can you introduce your group and talk about what you're working on?
Sure, thanks, Jenny. Good morning and afternoon to everybody. We're really glad you're joining us here I just wanted to talk about the Leadership Diversity Subcommittee of the Women of Flexo. I have a great team, including Alyssa Denny, my co-chair from Graphic Packaging, Nicole Anesti from PCMC, and Lee Carpenter from McDermott Graphics. And I want to talk to you about the goal of the committee. Could you hit the next slide, Katie? Thanks. So really our goal as part of this subcommittee is working towards increasing female representation on panels and speaking agreements and in industry leadership roles. So really getting women out there, promoting these opportunities and helping all of you know what's available to you. So one of the things that we've been focusing on is managing a database of representation opportunities within the industry, such as on boards and on committees. And these go beyond the FTA to other industry associations as well. Since I'm talking about that, I want to put a plug in for a position that is open in the FTA. The membership committee is looking for representatives. So any of you who are interested in that, please contact Jay Cable, or you can contact me also about that. But those are the things that we do, just try to get these opportunities out to you so you know about them. We're also, we're also increasing awareness of speaking and writing opportunities in the industry. Trying to get those, increase awareness of those, and supporting recruitment to job opportunities to leadership roles. We're also helping young professionals kind of visualize the career path that they would take to those leadership roles. So a couple of the things that we're working on right now is, one, we're putting together an article on how to join a board as part of an educational aspect of this. And we're also doing some spotlights on women in our industry who have taken leadership roles. And we have the first one coming out on Jenny Scott, who you just heard from, in the near future. So we're very excited about that and about connecting all of you with some of these great opportunities. So thanks, Jenny.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate that. Katie, if you want to move to the next slide. Getting a lot of feedback, not sure if that's me or what. So, okay, so Linda, will you take us through the recruitment subcommittee as well?
Actually, this is Kristen Shields. I'm filling in for Linda today. She's got another webinar she's on.
Thank you, Kristen.
I'm Kristen Shields. I'm president of Gray Mills, and Linda Pollard is the chair of our recruitment committee, and we also have Maggie Luce and Mackenzie Bush working on the committee also. Next slide. And really the goal of our committee is to coordinate with the different schools to let people know about Women of Flexo and that this group is out there to support students as well as professionals. And we have been working on creating an email database of all the schools that offer graphics programs and have combined that, or we will be combining that with our Women of Flexo email database. And our group has been collaborating with the marketing committee to create flyers directed towards these students. And our first flyer will be emailed to the contacts at these schools shortly after this meeting. And our future objective is to create a second piece that will go out to this email list detailing the many scholarship opportunities available through the FTA, because we have a lot of scholarship money and not a lot of applicants. So we really want to get the word out on that too.
All right, thank you very much, Kristen, appreciate that. Heather, would you like to go over the marketing and strategy committee?
Hi Jenny, this is Kayla Rogers. I'm taking over for Heather today.
Okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Kayla. I am with the Sunoco Institute of Packaging Design and Graphics at Clemson University. I sit on the marketing committee with the other team members you see here, Heather from Sun Chemical, Kara from Pamarco, and Katie from DuPont. Our mission is to increase awareness of the group, and on the next slide, some of the bullets you'll see outline some of the things we've been working on behind the scenes. Working with the other committees, we help develop content for FTA and all of the companies involved here to help promote this movement. We always welcome more ideas for reaching the women of Flexo in our industry, and we'd be happy to provide any assets you or your company might need to get some invitations out so that we can propel this movement forward. So feel free to reach out to anyone on the committee or Katie Graham or whoever if you're looking for those types of materials. If you haven't already, please like the Women of Flexo company page on LinkedIn. It's not listed here, but you should be able to find it if you search on LinkedIn. That's where the majority of our announcements get posted about events, inspiring stories of women in the Flexo industry, and other content that we're working with the other committees to help develop. So I'm looking forward to today's presentation, and I will pass this off to the next committee.
Great, thank you, Kaylin. Yes, we will have the addresses here after these committee updates. So appreciate that. Okay, so let's see if I get this right. Emily, you want to discuss who's on the mentorship group?
Close. I'm Amy Golden. I'm filling in for Emily today. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Amy Golden. Like I said, I'm with Print Pack. I sit on the mentorship committee with the other members that you see here, with Jean, Emily, Catherine, and Betty Lynn. So our goal, next slide, please. Our goal is to develop relationships between new members that are new to the industry and those with experience. Since our last Lunch and Learn, we posted a happy hour event for our professional mentors and mentees. The theme was Hindsight is 2020. In this event, we broke down into two groups. The mentors were in one group and the mentees were in another. There were questions that were discussed, and between the groups, they were similar but a little different. We then came back together as a group and shared a summary of what was discussed. We just kicked off the student mentorship program. It's our first year, so we're keeping the groups a bit smaller. There are going to be two groups with 6 to 7 students in each group and 2 mentors in each group. The program will be approximately 8 months long. We might go 9 months. We're going to kind of feel it out and work through our guideline that we built. We're very excited for our next happy hour event, which is tomorrow night. It's for members of the mentorship program. So this will be our first event that we host with student mentorship participants and the professional mentors and mentees all in one group. We're going to begin with intro, break out into groups, and then come back together and play Flexo Bingo. This upcoming holiday season, we'll have an event that will likely be a Secret Sally gift exchange. We're still working through the details of that event, but we do have a lot of activity within the program, and we're very excited to see the progression.
Great, thank you, Amy. Yeah, what a great group, and you know, for everybody who remembers getting out of college and getting in the workforce, this is a great outreach for those girls coming out of college and stuff. So appreciate all the work you guys are doing. Okay, a lot of great stuff going on. If you have any questions about the committees, feel free to reach out directly to these ladies, as you see on the slide here, to get more information, or you can follow on our LinkedIn page as well. Okay, now for the presentations we've been waiting for. Our speakers for today include Lori Sutton and Cory Kuhlenschmidt, both from Berry Global. I'm so excited they agreed to support our group today by presenting on 2 very important topics. Lori Sutton is the Director of Corporate Human Resources and the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Berry Global. She's responsible for leading the human resources initiatives for corporate employees throughout North America, as well as oversight for Berry's global diversity and inclusion efforts. Prior to Berry Global, she worked for Vectron Corporation for 13 years, holding various roles. Lori received a bachelor's degree in accounting from University of Southern Indiana. She also received her MBA from Indiana Wesleyan. She holds several certifications, including Certified Diversity Executive, Certified Diversity Professional, Certified Diversity Recruiter, and Certified Internet Recruiter. In addition, Lori has won several awards for her work in diversity and inclusion. She was also featured in the Profiles in Diversity Journal for building and leading an industry-recognized diversity and inclusion program. As well as Lori, I've got Cory Kuhlenschmidt, who is our Associate General Counsel, Labor and Employment for Berry Global's legal department. Cory provides labor and employment guidance to the U.S. Human Resources team and handles Berry's employment and labor disputes for U.S. operations. He's earned his JD from University of Richmond, T.C. Williams School of Law in Richmond, Virginia in 2001. After completing his law degree, Cory moved back to his hometown of Evansville, Indiana, where he worked for 2 local law firms handling management side, labor, and employment matters before joining Berry Global in June of 2017. So with that, I'd like to turn over to Lori Sutton.
Thank you, Jenny. And thank you for the opportunity to share with you today. I'm actually going to put myself on a timer because I will continue to talk. Because when I talk about this topic, I get really excited, and so I do want to be respectful of your time and also to hear the great information that Cory's going to share. Next slide. So today I always like to start off with a poll just to gauge, kind of your level of understanding when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So based off of this question, I would like to know, what do you think diversity, when you think about, diversity and inclusion, how would you describe it? Program or events, results of affirmative action, competitive advantage, or strategic alignment? So we'll give you a little bit of time to select your answer. And whenever you're ready to bring in the results, strategic alignment, excellent. So I will say that all of them are correct, and we'll kind of talk about, but strategic alignment, I'm happy to see that 52% selected that, because one of the things that I've seen over the years, I've been working in diversity and inclusion for 10 years, is that people's level of understanding is different, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, in order to achieve true diversity and inclusion, it should be strategically aligned, but the other options do also support diversity and inclusion. Thank you. So next slide. So what is diversity and inclusion? So whenever I do presentations or just talk to people in general, I always like to start off with, what do the terms mean? Because sometimes individuals like to use the terms interchangeably, but they are very different. And sometimes when people think of diversity, they don't see themselves fitting into the concept or into initiatives. And at the end of the day, we are all diverse because we all come from different backgrounds, we've had different experiences. And so when you think about diversity, most people think about it from things that you can see, but it also includes things that you can't see. And so in our introductions today, Cory, he received his education outside of Evansville. I stayed in Evansville, but I also did, in person, but my master's degree was totally online. And so your education levels can make you diverse, and even just moving, bringing in different experiences, just geographic location. And so while diversity does, when you think about it, it's around race, ethnicity, gender, and all those different things. But at the end of the day, we are all diverse individuals. And so inclusion, they do go hand in hand, but in order for you to have true inclusion, you have to respect the diversity of individuals. And so when you have true inclusion, people feel that they can be who they are and that they are respected. It doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with whatever concept of diversity they feel that they fit in, but it's just ensuring that everyone feels valued, respected, and they can maximize their potential, because there's nothing worse when people come to work and feel like they have to be someone else, or even in a social gathering, if they feel like they have to be someone else, that does not achieve true diversity and inclusion. Next slide. And so today I wanted to kind of give you a high-level glimpse of how do you really know that you've achieved true diversity and inclusion. And so when you think about that, you have to think about the internal and the external, because when you think about your organization, people bring their external experiences into the workplace, and your stakeholders are not only internal, but they're external. And I think that as a world, we're all seeing that things that are going on externally are starting to affect organizations. And some organizations are being very reactive, and that doesn't always work out well because your stakeholders want to ensure that the things that are important to them are important to you as well. And so you have to look at it from an internal and an external perspective. And so some of the things that you talked about earlier when it came to leadership, development, mentoring, and the other marketing, all those things, that has an internal and an external focus. And so what are the opportunities internally? And that's making sure that you're attracting and retaining the right people, and that people feel that they can bring their diversity of thought, they can be innovative, and that leads to you being a not only top performance for your employees, but it also makes you more attractive for people coming in and also for the customers that you provide products for. And then you also want to think about making sure you're reducing your liability internally. And so that looks at when D&I is mismanaged internally, that can be a liability. And so some of the things that I think about there is what type of training are you providing for your employees? It's not just about cutting costs, but it's also about what are you doing internally to drive the message that you want your employees to represent when it comes to D&I. And so you have to outline what are those liabilities that can minimize risk and also help to cut costs. And so when I think about here at Berry and the products that we provide, the customers that we have, you know, we could probably talk about that for days because we have, even though we're not on the front line of the customer, we have to think about the customer, the end result of who the customer truly is, and making sure that we're baking in whether it's how, you know, our products end up looking, you know, because I'm the type of person, I'm a visual person, and I will buy things just because the packaging is phenomenal. I mean, I really need the products, but I'm a visual person. And so, you know, you have to think about those things internally because it does affect all of your stakeholders. And then accessing opportunity externally. And that's really focusing on the changes within your community, because I think we all want to be leaders within the communities that we serve and we live, and we have to make sure that we are cognizant of what is going on. Because like I said originally, your employees are coming to work every day, and their goal is to ensure that they help to move the organization forward. And if there's things going on externally, we have to be, you know, mindful of those things, because there are always opportunities out in our communities, whether it's from a product perspective, recruiting, in your mentoring, where you were talking about engaging with the different colleges. You know, those are people that you build great relationships with, and you may look to bring them into your organization. And so it's just really being mindful of what's going on. And then reducing liability externally. And that really kind of plays into looking at the opportunities as well, because you don't want those negative perceptions of your organization in your customer base. And one of the things that I have, when we look at just different groups that are being represented, and which can be your customers, you know, there may be groups that feel that you don't embrace diversity and inclusion. And so ultimately for your customer, because like for Berry, you know, we have the customer who serves the customer, it could bring down their customer base. And so if they see that Berry doesn't, because we do have, our customers want to make sure that we're aligned with what their beliefs are. And so you have to be mindful of what your customers want. And that's why you have to look at all stakeholders, not just internally, but externally as well. Next slide. And so when you think about all of those, whether it's opportunities or risks internally and externally, the only way that you know that you've truly achieved diversity with a culture of inclusion is you have to have a strategy. It's nice. One of the things that I was told when I first started like 10 years ago is people would always say, well, why is this even important to us as an organization? And I always got the same answer, because it's the right thing to do. And I'm like, well, what does that really mean? Because if you don't have anything that attaches to the vision of the organization, saying that it's the right thing to do is not the right thing to do if you don't have actions in place. And so making sure that you have a strategy, and that does look different for every organization, but making sure that your D&I initiatives are aligned to your overall vision for your company will ensure that there is accountability and also that there is management support. Because if you don't have support from your leadership team, it's really just a bunch of programs that are taking place. When you achieve true diversity with a culture of inclusion, you are making an impact, and your employees and your overall stakeholders can tell that. You know, people enjoy working there. People are referring people to work at your organization. People see opportunities for them, and they feel like this is a place that they can grow. And the only way that this roadmap will work is you have to have all three of these. Because this is only my second organization working in D&I, but I will say that when I came to Berry, the one thing that I was impressed with was the level of engagement with our leadership team, because that is half the battle, trying to get your leadership team on board. And that does take some time. I always tell people D&I is not a marathon, or not a sprint, it's a marathon. It takes time. This is not something you can do overnight. But you definitely have to have individuals that are committed and also have the passion, and also have the knowledge that's needed to move things forward. And your D&I professional within your organization has to ensure that they understand the business. They have to build allies. It's not just the Lori Sutton show here at Berry. It absolutely is not. I'm still learning about the business, and I have a great group of people, including Cory, who help lead these initiatives. And so that there has to be a roadmap. It's not just, I love D&I, we need to do it. It's like you have to have a true strategy behind it. Next slide. And so I know today that we only had a short time to talk about D&I, but the main thing is that I just want to leave with you before we take our last poll, is that when you think about diversity and inclusion, you want to make sure that you have the right people leading the initiatives, but making sure that the initiatives are inclusive of all employees. I know a lot of organizations like to start off with certain employee resource groups, and I understand that, but at the end of the day, you have to ensure that everyone feels included, because the worst thing for an employee is for you to communicate, we are a company that is committed to diversity and inclusion, and then you've got a whole group of people who feel excluded. And so I just wanted to hit some of the high points. I appreciate the opportunity today, but I want to leave you with this last poll. So what is the most important aspect of diversity and inclusion? So we kind of got into culture, attracting, engagement, innovation, or external reputation. Okay. Whenever you're ready to provide the results. Absolutely, all of the above. So at the end of the day, we are really, when you look at D&I, you're trying to use your initiatives to drive positive change for your culture, which will lead to not only external or great reputation externally, but also internally. so that you can attract the right people who have the right engagement, and at the end of the day, it will help drive innovation, not only for your employees, but overall for your organization. So thank you so much for the time today, and I will turn it back over to Jenny.
Great, thank you so much, Lori. I really appreciate you joining us today to talk about diversity and inclusion. I want to remind everybody to ask questions in the Q&A section at the bottom. Feel free, as well as I mentioned before, to go ahead and if you want to post them anonymously, there should be a place there to check that as well too. So next, Cory will be discussing harassment and discrimination. So Cory, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jenny. I really appreciate everyone the opportunity to be able to speak with you today. And like Lori, I have my timer going as well, because as an attorney, we love to talk and hear ourselves talk, and we can use a lot of words at times. To give you a little bit of a brief intro about my part of this presentation, I want to give you a little bit of a roadmap or a review of some legal concepts that companies, employers, and employees face with harassment and discrimination. But then I also want to give you some of my personal observations that might be related to this theme, I think, of today's presentation here about the questions you may have but were afraid to ask. So hopefully some of those observations will be a little bit insightful or helpful to that. And then also on that theme of questions you may have but were afraid to ask, I want to follow up Jenny's comment that there are no stupid questions. So please feel free to ask questions that you might have. There are no stupid questions. There are only stupid answers, and since I'm in charge of the answers for this part of the presentation, the pressure's on me. So when we're talking about this objective of harassment and discrimination policies, such policies and training, hopefully it will provide employees, of course, with an equal opportunity to enjoy a fair, safe, and productive work environment, right? Reinforce that all employees have a right to a workplace free of intimidation, harassment. And, reaffirming to employees that harassment, discrimination, sexual harassment, will not be tolerated. And of course, the training will also reinforce, that harassment should be reported and how it can be reported. And to build off of what Lori was talking about with her presentation, diversity and inclusion, cultural intelligence, all of that helps to build a culture within an employer that helps understand that, people should be respected, that they should have an environment that maximizes potential. And as much as an employer might try to build those kinds of opportunities and that kind of culture, you might still have some cracks or bad apples where things will happen and occur. And that's where, from a legal perspective, you want to have policies and a way to report. So the next slide. So when we're talking about harassment, we're going to talk about what it is, different kinds of harassment, and the protected characteristics when we're talking about these issues. But generally, harassment is usually a form of discrimination that consists of words or jokes, comments. It can be physical. It can be a physical action, a physical assault, or violence. But it is an action that's directed to an employee because of that employee's protected characteristics. Next slide. And when we talk about protected characteristics, most commonly, of course, we're probably talking about sex or race. But there are other protected characteristics under state or federal law that go beyond just those categories. But a lot of times, in my experience, that the harassment or discrimination that's being directed against someone of a protected characteristics, it's usually sex, age, race, disability. Those are probably more of the common characteristics that do come up. Next slide. And so when we're talking about this behavior that's being directed against an individual because of their protected characteristics, it can come about in, of course, a variety of different ways, but one can be where maybe a male directs offensive behavior to an individual employee because she is female, right? Maybe it is directed to an individual person, right? And that behavior then is, of course, based upon a stereotype that maybe the male associates with the coworker being female. But Another way in which this harassing behavior can also come about is where maybe that male doesn't direct it to any one individual person, but expresses a view about females that is inappropriate or discriminating. And of course, then those coworkers who hear that comment or are present for that comment, of course, then become associated with that comment. So it can be, these behaviors can take place either in a direct one-on-one kind of situation, or it can also come from more of a hostile environment where you're expressing these ideas out generally. Next slide. And talking then about discrimination and sex discrimination in particular, when we talk about sex discrimination, again, we're talking about usually, a male discriminating against a female because of that female sex. We're also talking about sexual harassment, and that may be where a male is making inappropriate comments about how a female looks, something like that, or it could be sexual harassment where that male employee is directing a sexual favor or request and is doing so on the basis of either denying that female employee a promotion or a raise. That latter form would be what we would call quid pro quo. And of course, then stereotyping is another form of sex discrimination, of associating females as a part of a certain stereotype, or vice versa, associating males only as one part of a certain stereotype. Pregnancy over the years has gotten a lot of protection as well. The Supreme Court several years ago, was very highlighted a very strong opinion on the protections that pregnant employees face in the workplace, and that they should be accommodated. They should be provided a workplace where they can do their work. But the one that is probably the most recent that has gotten a lot of attention would be gender identity, and that someone may be biologically male, but they identify as female, and they should not be discriminated or harassed on that basis. When we talk about sexual harassment, again, just to kind of reinforce what I had stated earlier, we're talking about a verbal advance, a physical advance. It could be sexually explicit, it could be derogatory or demeaning, but it's something that is directed to the coworker, which interferes with his or her job performance. And in a hostile environment situation, that just might be where there are all sorts of rude or crude or inappropriate comments that inundate the workspace. In a quid pro quo, again, that is more of an example of where a supervisor says to a subordinate, I will not give you that pay raise unless you go out with me. So those are kind of the general kinds of examples of those. Next slide. So when we're talking about harassment, one thing to reinforce is that sexual harassment, it can happen, and it typically does, as we've seen in headlines and whatnot. It can typically happen from a male to a female, but sexual harassment can happen from a male to another male. It can happen from a female to a female, or from a female to a male. Okay, these issues of harassment and discrimination, they implicate employees. They apply to interns. They apply to visitors or customers. So you work for an employer, and that employer for whom you work, let's take me and Barry for example. I work at Barry, and I should not have to put up with a customer's harassment or discrimination simply because they are an important customer of Barry. You in all respects of your employment, not just with your coworkers, you should have an environment where you are free of harassment, discrimination. Next slide. Another thing to consider is where harassment can occur. This isn't something that just occurs on your quote unquote traditional workday time or at your traditional workplace. It can happen wherever employees are performing work or fulfilling their work duties. We're talking about outside of, your typical workspace walls, at other events, trainings, conferences, office parties. It can be employee interactions off hours, even on personal time, where those interactions can have an impact in the workplace. And so, employers cannot put their head in the sand when it comes to employee interactions that occur just because those interactions occur outside of normal work hours or are outside of traditional workspaces. Next slide. So before I get into reporting harassment and discrimination, I want to give you with kind of that idea about legal considerations and what is harassment and where can it occur and who can it affect. I want to also provide you with, I think, some observations that would hopefully fall under that theme of maybe questions you might have or have thought about, but maybe have never been afraid to ask. And I will tell you that, my experience having represented employers for about 20 years on employment-related issues such as this, I have been exposed to employers that maybe not on the company as a whole, but maybe within certain departments or with certain leaders or certain employees, they hold on to some pretty archaic obstacles or attitudes when it comes to handling or addressing complaints or concerns of inappropriate behavior. It's not uncommon. It can happen where, you run into an inappropriate incident, and when you try to raise that to someone, you might get the feedback of, I've known Harry for 20 years, and Harry would never do something like that, right? And it's important for you to understand or to have confidence in or to expect, that an employer would have a harassment and discrimination policy in place that makes you feel comfortable that that kind of perspective won't be tolerated. Someone saying, I've known Harry for 20 years and there's no way he would touch someone like that. Well, that person may very well have never seen Harry do that, because of course he wouldn't do that in front of that particular person. But this is the whole reason for having a reporting process. It's so that if you see something, if you hear something, or if something happens to you, that you're able to report it, you're able to file that complaint with your supervisor, your manager, or human resources. If your company has a hotline, using that as a mechanism. The employer should have multiple avenues for you to be able to report a concern or a complaint. And certainly the company itself should be reaffirming to its employees, that supervisors are held to a higher standard, that not only should they not tolerate that kind of behavior, but if they hear of anything, or if an employee comes to them with a concern and says, now I don't want you to report this, that the supervisor understands that he or she must act and must raise that to the next level. All of these are very important so that at the end of the day, an investigation, will be conducted. And that leads me to another theme or concern. And that is, sometimes employers have raised issues of, oh my gosh, if we have a harassment and reporting policy, and then we go through all this trouble of training individuals about what that policy is and how to report something, that's just going to open the floodgates to all of these fraudulent or false claims of discrimination or harassment. And I will tell you again, in my experience, in practice and having represented employers, is that possible? Technically, yes. Have I ever seen that happen? No, certainly not. And I will tell you that if an employer does experience that, it's not because they have a reporting policy issue. They've probably got a severe cultural issue that needs to be addressed. So on the next slide. So from your responsibility as an individual, as an employee, yes, whether you are the recipient of the harassment or whether or not, you're aware of it, everyone does have a responsibility for ensuring a workplace free of harassment, intimidation. So it's important that everyone is familiar with an employer's policies, that understands how to report issues or concerns, and also, will support one another. So when those issues arise. And I will say this, that, you know, there might be times, whether you're a college student in your very first internship at a company, or whether you have 20 years experience in the industry, you know, you might be working for an employer where at some point you find yourself in a situation where you are isolated, vulnerable, and particularly that can probably arise where you have an imbalance of power of relationship between you and the individual with which you're interacting. And if you find yourself in that position, that's where these issues of inappropriate conduct, of harassing conduct can happen. And it can lead to this he said, she said kind of dynamic. And I would only say is that if you find yourself in that kind of a situation, that kind of incident, it is very important that you report that, and you report that timely. And as was kind of mentioned earlier in the presentation here, that's one of the importance I think of building, you know, a good relationship, having a mentor relationship, having a circle within which you can rely. Because, you know, if you do find that happens, you should report it. You should feel supported in reporting that, and you should feel comfortable and confident that the employer will take it seriously and investigate it thoroughly. And from where I sit as the attorney, you know, that is one of my roles here in Barry, is to ensure that we have that robust and appropriate mechanism in place so that people understand that those complaints will be taken seriously. And I appreciate the time. And Jenny, I hope that there are some questions for Lori or myself, and we're happy to take them.
Great, great. Wow, you guys, that's a lot of great information from both of you, Lori and Cory. Appreciate you discussing these topics that, you know, a lot of times aren't discussed on a daily basis, but it is important to all of us, female or male, I think, in the industry as well. So thank you very much again. So I'm not seeing any questions yet, but I do have one, because I think it's probably something that's maybe on a lot of people's minds as well. So what if my company doesn't have a policy, whether it's for harassment, or it's a smaller company that might have a leader of the company that's also HR, that's also the, you know, the payroll person? How do I deal with the situation if it comes up? Cory, if you can maybe kind of help guide us in an area like that. Because a lot of the flexo industry does have more smaller mom and pop shops, not necessarily everybody's a large corporation. So how would I deal with that if I'm in a small company?
Well, I would say that my experience has been in representing employers of that size. You know, they take a lot of times they can take pride in who they are and what they offer. And it's not uncommon that literally their name is on the sign, you know, that their name is on the product, and they want to stand behind that, and they want it to be something that they respect. And a lot of times, you know, they will at least profess to me that they have this open door policy, to where if you have concerns or if you have an issue, that you can come directly to that company owner and address them, right? And if that is the policy, you know, I would certainly encourage, you know, you to take advantage of that. And again, you know, depending upon what your issue is or what you're raising as a concern, it can be an uncomfortable or perhaps intimidating proposition. So again, that's where I relate to, you know, it's important to develop, you know, a network and perhaps a mentorship or of sorts, so that you can develop that appropriate support. But then with respect to, you know, raising an issue or complaint, wearing my legal hat from where I sit, you know, the issue often comes down to, you know, establishing credibility. And so whether you're raising this issue in a smaller company to, you know, an owner directly, or you're raising this issue in a larger company with maybe a more robust reporting procedure, there's still, I think, some basics that you want to try to adhere to. And that would be, you know, be as specific and detailed as possible about the circumstances that led up to the incident, of course, the incident itself, and specific about the circumstances of what happened after the incident, you know, leading up to the time you've reported it. you know, and you just want to get into details that answer questions like what happened, who said what, where did it occur, who else was present, is there anyone else who can corroborate what actually occurred, is there anyone else who was present or could corroborate the facts and circumstances that led up to the incident or the facts and circumstances that occurred after the incident. You know, be prepared to, you know, explain with whom you've shared the information, and to the extent possible, although, you know, when these things do happen, you're not prepared for them, and it can be a very emotional and troubling way in which to figure out how to respond and proceed. But as best you can organize that information, it's always usually better to try to make as timely of a report or a complaint as possible. You know, and then in addition to that, you know, there could be texts or emails or direct messages or instant messages, et cetera, that relate to all of this, and you want to make sure that you have that stuff preserved as well.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so a question came up in the box for Lori and the group. I was recently promoted to plant manager of a 50-plus-year-old facility that historically was very male-oriented, to put it nicely. As a young female, I'm running into issues with older male managers not accepting that I have the capability and authority to make decisions. Do you have any suggestions on how I can prove myself and make this into a more productive situation? Lori, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so one thing that I would suggest is I kind of mentioned allies, and I would probably seek out, it may not be a female, because based off of this question, if there is another female that you could kind of talk to about their experiences in the workplace. The other thing is finding, there may be a male, if it's, I know it's male dominated, that you can help you to navigate through this situation. I think the best thing to do is to continue to, you know, work hard, get engaged, try to partner. One of the things that I have found, even though I've worked in HR but also worked in accounting, is that I always try to find that person that I knew that I could learn something from and kind of partner up with them, and then they became you know, someone who would always speak on my behalf. And it's really building those relationships that can sometimes help with the situation. But I think it's just finding the right people that you feel comfortable talking to, and hopefully them helping you navigate the situation.
Great, appreciate that. Does anybody else on the committees have any comments to that? If not, we'll move on to the next question. Okay, got another question here. How do I avoid becoming a victim of exclusion, discrimination, or harassment? So maybe Cory, you want to start with that? How do I avoid becoming a victim of harassment?
Well, without maybe a little more context, it's hard for me to answer that. Although, you know, I would say that to the extent that kind of question implicates how do I avoid doing something wrong to become a victim of harassment, I would try to erase that supposition to the question, right? I mean, everyone should be doing their job well, should be doing it competently, and should feel free and welcome to engage and interact with others. And if that's what you're doing within your workspace, then you know, you shouldn't feel, you should never be, you know, subject to harassment or discrimination. I don't think that individuals who come into work and engage and try to do what they should be doing and want to be doing, you know, and are there to do a good job, if someone chooses to direct discriminatory behavior towards you, then that's on that person. That's that person's problem as far as them having done something wrong. And for you, of course, it's a terrible thing to go through, but then that's where, of course, the company should be alerted immediately so that they can investigate that and take the appropriate action.
Yeah, I agree with what Cory said. Without having a little bit more context around the question, I would suggest, I know people feel like going to HR is, people are always like, I don't want to be in HR. HR individuals, we are very friendly and we have great relationships with our business partners, but I would probably suggest that if you see something and you feel that it's creating a culture that is uncomfortable for you, I would suggest talking to someone in HR if you don't feel comfortable talking to your manager. But like Cory said, some people, like I said before, it's different personalities, different experiences that come to work, and then we're all in the workplace together. But I don't think that most people come to work, but not downplaying that these things do occur in the workplace. But I think I would just suggest going either to your manager to talk about it, and if you don't feel comfortable with that person, going to HR.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question that I had as well, from earlier discussions was, I work for a company and I'm either traveling to another country or working with other international folks that might have different beliefs or different ways that they do business, or they, I don't know the right word to put for there, but let's say that maybe they might think it's acceptable to treat people a certain way where we might look at it as harassment. International cultures are different. So Cory, do you have any suggestions around that topic?
Not specifically, because I have to admit, I don't travel internationally for Barry, although I think just from a kind of wherever there is an opportunity for miscommunication, the ability to be sincere and transparent about what you're trying to accomplish can go a long way, just so that you're trying to minimize the risk of misunderstanding. And for those that do travel, though, internationally for Barry, and Lori, you probably, or you may be aware of any resources. I mean, Barry in the past has done presentations to the employee population, generally speaking, about, cultural awareness and differences in culture. So, if you're going to be traveling to a different area of the world and you have questions or concerns or interests about that, I would just suggest maybe reaching out to someone to learn about those potential issues and where they may be. And if you find yourself in an awkward situation, again, just trying to be sincere and transparent about what you're trying to communicate could go a long way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would definitely suggest, so cultural intelligence is very important if you're traveling internationally. And I think that because the world is becoming more and more diverse, there's a lot more resources that are available, whether it's online or if you go to your local bookstore, or if you're, someone who likes to do audiobooks. There's a lot of materials that are out there that are like quick reads, and it gives you like the primary things that you should know. But even if you've been to countries, certain countries before, I think it's always a good idea to kind of brush up on those things before you go, because, in some cultures, looking people in the eye is disrespectful, whereas in North America, if you don't look people in the eye, people see that as, well, why aren't you paying attention to me? So I think that it's always good to brush up on those things just so you are prepared. And also speaking to someone within your organization or even a friend who's been to that country, just so they can give you some tips. But like Cory said, we've had a course here, and our training department has information on international travel.
Okay, great. I know we got just 2 minutes left. I got 2 more questions. Hopefully we can get through those pretty quick. What if there have been threats of retaliation if I report harassment and there is no one within the company I can file a complaint with? That's tricky.
Okay, if you have filed a complaint of harassment or discrimination and you've been threatened with retaliation, that is illegal. I think you could raise that to the company to say that you don't think that's appropriate, you know, that you're raising a valid concern and you would expect it to be investigated or addressed. And, you know, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but it also might be something that, you know, you're going to need some internal support or some support on your side, so to speak, to talk through those. So again, that's where a network or maybe a mentorship or so that you could maybe talk to someone. However, of course, the other avenue would be is if you feel like, you know, within your space at work that, you know, you've raised an issue and it's not being addressed appropriately, that, you know, you can certainly go speak to an attorney that, you know, and one that probably most likely handles plaintiffs, you know, employee-sided matters, and he or she would be able to, you know, walk with you through, you know, what your issues are, what the facts and circumstances are, and what your options are as far as how you might want to proceed.
Right.
But you know, I can certainly appreciate that's not an ideal answer, but that's kind of some of the options I see.
Yeah, okay, we're really close on time, but I want to get this last question in because I think it's important. How does social media impact this topic? Specifically, if is a company still liable or involved if an employee does harass another employee outside the workplace or online? That's tricky, especially this day and age, right, Cory?
Well, that's a whole nother presentation. However, I will tell you that.
That's what I was getting ready to say. This is a whole other topic.
So, I will say this: things that happen on social media or online can equate to the workplace, can equate to your workspace, can equate to your terms and conditions of employment. So if there is activity or action or communication that's going on via the internet, via Facebook or Twitter or whatever, that doesn't mean then all of a sudden it's not related to your workplace. So all of that can absolutely be grounds or serve as a foundation or facts for someone having concerns about harassment or discrimination.
Okay, thank you. And we might have to call back on you again if this becomes a bigger topic. So appreciate that. Okay, thank you everybody who was joining today. Thank you, Lori and Cory, for two great presentations and great interaction and comments on the questions and stuff as well.